As we saw in the last video, a file or folder has a set of permissions associated with it. These permissions define which users can do what to that particular file or folder. This is significant because in a Unix-based system, you can not only have more than one user, but you can have more than one logged in user at one time. The permission string we saw before looked a little something like this. The very first letter in the sequence tells you what kind of file you're looking at. If it's a dash, this means it's a normal file. This is followed by a set of 9 letters and dashes. Each set of 3 letters defines the permissions for a certain type of user. The first set of 3 defines the permissions for the owner of that file. Then, the next set of 3 defines the permissions for the group owner of the file. And then finally, the last set of 3 defines the permissions for everybody else. As you can see, it always goes RWX. The R stands for read permissions, the W stands for write permissions, and the X stands for executable permissions if it's an executable file. At each of these slots, if you see a letter, that means you do have permission to do that thing. If you see a dash, that means you don't have permission. If you want to change the permissions associated with a certain file, you can use the chmod command. Let's go ahead and try it out on hi.text. Instead of its current permissions, let's make it so that the owner can read and write but not execute, and everyone else can't do anything. To do so, we would just do chmod, and then we would give it the number 600, and then we give it the name hi.text. Now if we do an ll again and take a look at the file, we see that the permissions have changed. Instead of rw- and then 2 r's later, we just have rw and then dashes all the way across. So as I said earlier, this does mean that the owner can read and write, it can't execute, and then nobody else can do anything else. And if we break down the 600, this makes sense. The 6 is associated with the first 3 letters. 6 in binary is 110. This is reflected by the R, W, and dash. R and W are enabled, and the dash means that executing is disabled. And then the next 2 zeros represent the next 6 spaces. And as we can see, they're all zeros, or all dashes, as in disabled. Alternatively, what if we wanted to just give everyone permission to do everything with this file? Well, instead of 600, we could use 777, which is all ones across the board. And then if we LL again, we see that, like we expected, all of these are filled with letters, RWX, all the way across. And as you can also see, the 2 hard links always change. So if you apply new permissions to one, they'll be reflected in the other, like you'd expect. Now, allowing everyone to have full permissions on a file is not always the best idea, so let's put this back to 600. Now, let's say we want to change the owner of this file. Right now it's Luke Parham, but what if we wanted to just make root the owner of this file? Well, to do that, we can use the chown command. In this case, we'll say chown, give it the new owner name, and then hi.text again. And we actually see that this is not permitted. It looks like the Luke Parham user on this machine doesn't have permissions to change the owner, but when you don't have permission to do things, if you're an admin on the machine, you can use a command called sudo, and that will allow you to enter your password and get around these restrictions. Let's go ahead and do that. We'll do sudo chown root hi.text. I'll just enter my password real quick. And now if we do another ll, we see that the owner is now root instead of me. Since I no longer have permission to read, write, or execute this file, I pretty much can't do anything to it. So we can try and cat it, cat, hi.text, and permission denied. I'm not allowed to look at it, I can't edit it, I can't do anything with this file. Now, like I said, I am an admin, so I can break out the sudo again. We can do that real quick. Sudo cat hi.text. And it is empty, but it did work. It didn't deny me permission. And as you may have noticed, this time it didn't actually make me put my password in. If you've done this recently enough, sudo will just remember your password and allow you to do this more than once.